Welcome to the Eagle Insight Podcast. And today's guest is Wes Lehman. Now, this is a marketing guru that I truly respect. He is the founder and CEO of CMOQ, which is a fractional CMO agency. He's the founder and CEO of Urban Buffalo Marketing, which is a visual identity and web design agency. He's the genius behind the marketing at Synapse, Florida, and he also helped me launch my business several years ago and is responsible for my entire marketing scheme as I started off in the coaching world a couple of years ago. And above all, he's a great friend. Thanks so much for being here, Wes.
Yeah, man, that was just all in a day's work. So, no problem.
Well, it was formative, and there's something special about your first marketing effort because there was so many questions that you asked during that phase of like, who are you and what is your company and what is it about that really I hadn't thought through. And that's one of the things that I wanted to kind of pull out of you today is how do you go about leading your clients into understanding their business better?
I'm going to start with a shameless plug, but only because you mentioned it. Okay. So you mentioned CMOQ, which is my fractional CMO agency. The Q stands for quintessentials. And so this has been like a obsession since I was a kid. I'm always trying to distill things down to what they are in their first principles, what they are in their most basic level. And so I came into marketing by knowing absolutely nothing about marketing and telling people that I could do marketing. And so people would say, "Can you do this?" When I first started, I said, "Yeah." And I would figure out how to do it. And so I kind of reverse engineered my way. And so I had to come up with processes and systematic thinking to get to the right results. And so when you mentioned like your brand identity and your visual identity, your name identity, all those different things, I had to look at it and go, all right, what are the underlying consistent principles and patterns that happen? And I'm a big whiteboard, like I told you before that I used to have sticky notes, big poster board, like notes across my walls. And that's now being converted into a nursery. So bye-bye office. But because I have these like obsessive thoughts and I go on these deep dives of what makes something the way that it is. And so when it comes to an identity or a visual identity of a brand, the first thing you have to do is, well, if it's built, who is it built around? Well, it's built around Bob Dixon. Okay. Well, what's Bob Dixon like? And so it was formulating the right questions to extract the identity of who the business is built around. Because the business is always going to be built around 1 to 3 people. Almost, I would say 95% of the time. And so finding that individual or core identity, and then how do we translate that to something that people will look at, will be compelled by, will see that it's representative, and will be informative for the business. And so we got to like package all these things together. And the questions can range from anywhere from, hey, if your visual identity or your logo were a texture, what would it feel like? If your website was a song or an album, which one would it be? And it sounds bonkers, and it sounds frou-frou or woo-woo. But it works, man. I don't know. It's one of those things that, if you people will say, like, actually, it's this album. That's what's going to be playing in the office when that website's getting designed, right? Like it's a full immersion into this identity, because I will say there's in branding, 50% of the battle is creating something that's great that everyone can agree on, and the other 50%, like from a forward-facing perspective, and the other 50% is creating something that you are proud to stand behind.
Yeah,
because you have to be able to look at it and go, yes, I feel empowered walking into the office this morning because that is me. When I look at that, that is a reflection of who we are, of our values as a company. And look, you can get on Fiverr and create a kick-ass logo that's going to get the job done. And sometimes that's worth a shot. But, you'll probably bat about 5%. which I don't know how that converts into MLB. I don't know. I'm not a baseball guy. I don't know why I said bat. But it's one of those things where it just, when you really create something and you see the look in the team's eyes and they go, yes, that's it. It changes who you are as a team, and it starts to form your company culture through a way that people are perceiving it.
Yeah, I think it lends itself to the idea of belonging. When people, like, if you don't love your logo enough to put it on a hat or put it on a shirt, right, and wear it proudly. Like, I belong to organizations that have these really crappy logos, and you're like, I'm not wearing that shirt. I'm not going to go to a bar wearing that shirt. People are going to look at that and go, what is that? Right? It looks like some sort of Rorschach test.
Yep.
That's not helpful. But I can tell you that when my clients get a hat that has the logo on it, it's like, hell yeah, I'll wear that.
Right.
Hell yeah, I would love to put that out in front of people, and because people ask me about it, it's like, yeah, it's my leadership coach. Yeah.
And if that's your perspective, I've had the same issue too. The difference is when I go into an organization, I change the logo if it's not good. And I've changed logos for people who are not my clients. I'm like, look, there have been partner organizations where I'm like, I have to put that logo on the website. I'll reach out to them and go, can I redo your logo so it looks better on our site? But if people are thinking this, so we're having this conversation, we're kind of digesting it and parsing it consciously, but that's happening subconsciously with 90% of the population when they look by and they see a crappy visual identity, which is what a logo is. Well, it's part of the package. Intuitively, they're thinking subconsciously, this brand isn't intentional. This company is not intentional. This business, if this restaurant logo or sign outside their whatever looks like this, what are their steaks going to taste like?
Right.
The one exception for that is Burns, who has terrible marketing and the best food in the world. So.
That's
but
fair.
it's because they've been doing it for 100 years.
That's fair. They got something right. There is some truth to the legacy logos that have history that people can identify with. There's a comfort there. Like, okay, I got it. It's not flashy. It's just damn good food. Right. So I'm okay with that. But there's also branding. I just recently read an article about a utility company. They help with commercial plumbing and electricity. And it was founded by somebody whose initials were Webb. And so it was Webb Industries. And it was founded in the 30s, and Webb Industries got them to about the 90s, and they kept that as a name, and people started calling up and asking if they could fix their internet. Right. And you can't have Webb Industries as a legacy industry when your name has been outdated. So they had to update that somehow. But I see your point, and the part that is so fascinating to me is how you pin down a founder or an owner or a leadership team to really articulate who they are. Because that's a hard question to answer. Yeah. And as you said, it's 1 to 3 people that the whole business is really built around. Who are they? Mm-hmm. And what are your values? Because a lot of companies haven't articulated their values. They're like, yeah, we know. We know our values. Right. We all have the same values. Yeah. But then when you ask them to articulate it, it turns out they have 5 different answers. Yeah. Yep. So what does that feel like when you're going through that process with people? Is it painful for them?
The most common statement is, "Oh, I've never thought about that." And there's a term that I use and abuse, but no one else uses it that I've heard. So I should probably trademark it. It's called the marketing mirror. And that's when we start going through these exercises, whether intentionally or not, we're holding up a mirror, not just to the identity of the founders and the co-founders, but to the reflection of the entire business. And so all of a sudden, the words that are in your logo, my mind is thinking about your sales funnel, right? So we've gone to this like cool Mad Men visual identity, and now it's like, all right, nerd data and KPIs, right? Because we have to do a few different things. So we're going through this exercise, and they say, okay, the name of the business is actually, let me ask you, Bob, what's under your Arete Solutions, right? What is it?
It's Arete Strategic Consulting.
Strategic Consulting. Okay. I think I have some of the old iterations of the logos that we did ingrained in my head. So my bad. So strategic consulting, right? But I know that you and I at some point went through this process. I believe we did. If it said something different, that's an informational problem. So a good design should solve 3 problems. It should solve an identity problem, it should solve an informational problem, and it should solve an inspirational problem, right? And so we want to, we have to inform. And part of the logo is explaining what your business is. And so that piece is like, because people go, well, and then all of a sudden you're in this conversation and they're saying, oh, well, but our business also does this. And they're going back and forth, and the team starts arguing. And I'm just like, which is why I always try to make the team as small as possible in these meetings. And this happens in product naming businesses, product naming sessions as well. I was recently doing a product naming session. We had to have, 6 people in there to kind of represent all the different heads. It was a great session, really enjoyable. And I mean, what the engineer says is different than what the CEO says, is different than and so you have to bring all these things together. And so it really is an inflection, a time for rather reflection within the people. And I don't think it's painstaking as much as it's novel to them. It's which is crazy, because how serious do you take your business? They take it very serious. That's not the question. But you don't have the opportunities, because you're so in the weeds, to stop and think about what it is that you're actually doing. And a lot of the stuff's not getting documented. And so it kind of pops up in different ways through that process. It's fun to watch. I've never seen a big fight come out of it yet, but I'm looking forward to like when I can go, Jerry, or something like that,
So I think, in a lot of ways during that conversation, you and I are in the same business. When I deal with leaders and I talk to them about what are their fundamental values, a lot of them have a hard time articulating what they are. They have aspirational values that they say, well, okay, we want to put down integrity, or we want to put down hard work, teamwork. So, the normal things that you see on a corporate values sheet. But that doesn't really get to the essence of who they are, what makes them unique, and what holds them together. Because it's your values which lead to your culture that holds you together. And so when you're asking me as a client to come in, it's like, can you articulate your values? And I'm like, hey, I'm used to leading a team to talk about our collective values, but I was a solopreneur at the time. And so I'm like, okay, so what are my values as a professional with respect to this business? And I hadn't gone through the practice of doing that, because I'm like, well, I'll do that when I have a team. Like, no, it starts now.
Right.
It starts now. And by the way, because Five Eagles is one of our brands, this is the original logo right here that's on a coffee mug, which I put proudly on coffee mug, so I get to see it every morning. And you'll notice that the Five Eagles brand looks just like that, and it's on the opposite side of this one. So that has the exact same color scheme, because it belongs in my whole branding scheme that Wes helped me develop based on who I believed I was at that moment. And an interesting thing happened along the way, Wes, is when I start drifting, when I have mission creep, as we call it in the military, when I start trying to be everything for everyone, I have to go back to my core. And when I look at my logo, I'm like, you do strategic consulting. You're not the one that does those little special projects. You're not the one that does, let me do a manpower study. That's not the kind of consulting you do. You do strategic consulting. And on the opposite side, when it says we do leadership coaching. We do training and leadership coaching, right? And our logos actually help ground us. It's a visible reminder of who we are. And for those of us that go through the process, we remember the values we articulated that led to that formation.
Right.
So it's been a few years since you helped me through that process, Wes, but I can tell you that the echoes are still there.
I love that. I love hearing that. That's good feedback. I'm going to clip it and put it as a testimonial on the website.
Good. You're welcome to it. And I'm going to steal Marketing Mirror. No, I'm not.
Go for it.
I heard you trademark it earlier. So, One of the things I struggled with as a new business leader or new business owner was, I came out of the military. They don't teach you marketing and sales. They don't teach you they teach you admin for sure, but not finance unless you happen to be in that specialty in the military. So I knew operations pretty well. Did a lot of that in the military, but the marketing and sales piece, I couldn't tell you the difference between the two. And I remember having a conversation with the then CEO of Synapse about marketing and sales. I'm like, yeah, they're the same thing. And he just looked at me like I had two heads. And he's like, yeah, I know that some people think that, which I think was a very kind answer. But then I got to know you, and I got to see how different they were. But for those new business owners that happen to be in my audience, because there's a lot of veteran entrepreneurs that are listening, can you help articulate in a way that I probably can't? What's the difference, and how do they need to work together? Because that's usually a friction point.
Yeah, I'm going to give you my favorite answer, which is it depends.
Okay.
Here's how I tend to deduce it. And I wish I would have had some graphics pre-pulled up that I could just screen share and show. The way that I think of it is through the funnel process. And everyone uses the word funnel, but literally just think of a funnel. And everything that is not in the funnel is marketing. Everything that is in the funnel is part of a sales process. Like if I had to draw a hard line, that's where I would draw it, right? And basically the question is, okay, well, what qualifies? You hear the word qualifies a lot. I'm not going to talk about SQLs and MQLs because those things mean different things to different people. And every organization I talk to, I have to relearn. It's like jumping from if you travel the Caribbean, there's different Hispanic-speaking countries. Spanish-speaking countries speak different iterations, and you can say a curse word in one language that's a normal word in another. You need to be really careful, and that's what it feels like talking marketing and sales language from company to company. When what qualifies someone to be in the funnel is going to be them taking an action. If we can simplify it one way, it's them going, okay, yes, I'm interested. Them telling you that somehow. Let's just keep it at that really high level. And from there, in theory, I'm handing it off to a sales team or to the person who follows up, the person who's doing a demo, the person who's doing whatever that next step is. If it's plumbing, it's a certain process. If it's SaaS, it's a different process. And this is the beauty, just to take a step back. The beauty of marketing and sales is that it is universally applicable. And I hate when people say you have to niche because it's like music theory. It can only get so complex, and then it's jazz. And if you go beyond that, it's just noise, right? So they get handed off. Now, the only exception that I have is e-commerce. And this is where e-commerce is a different system than, hey, talk to my team. Some businesses have both. You mentioned Synapse before. Synapse is a perfect example. So we, I want to share so bad, but I'd have to blur things out. We recently did what I call like a functional marketing systems map, which is creating basically what I call like a DNA strand of where everything starts and goes. And there's a different one for e-commerce than there is for sponsorships and exhibitors and that kind of thing, because it's an event. And so, when I say e-commerce for this, I'm talking about ticket sales, right? It's the click to buy. And some exhibitors can click to buy. So suddenly you have a product that's being sold from a sales team and from e-commerce. My job is to sell tickets and to create people to go to sales. But when I'm selling tickets, it's pretty much all me, right? Not literally me, but all marketing. And so it comes down to, can you get people on the site, and then can you get them to click and buy? And then the product is, then you're handing off the product delivery. So e-commerce is that sales portion takes out the sales team, right? And of course, that's why usually you're not buying a $30,000 e-commerce. You're usually not going to be paying more than, I don't know, some really, of course, like there's like concert tickets for front row seats and those kind of things. Those are the exceptions. It's very, very rare that anyone's going to be spending more than $1,000 on just a normal click to buy thing for business, in my experience.
So I'm glad that you said that, because I have not distinguished in the past between e-commerce sales and what we'd call, I guess, normal or traditional sales. Mm-hmm. The funnel is really interesting. I drew out your description of it. I've built many funnels, some more successful, some not so much. But I never thought about that as the handoff point. That is once it's in the funnel, then there's a person or a system that is guiding you into the final sale. And the reason it's a funnel is because it starts large and it gets smaller, because we know that there are people that are going to go into that funnel that don't come out the bottom. You're going to lose some along the way, right? But there's a certain percentage, and we need to measure that percentage to realize how effective our funnel is.
Yeah.
So that, and yeah, if you send me the graphic, I'll make sure that the team includes that in the podcast for the video portion of the podcast. But I think that's a really important point, is that handoff between marketing and sales, I think, sometimes is a friction point, because it's not finely defined in most organizations. And the sales team will usually blame low sales on the marketing team, and the marketing team will any blip in sales. Those guys just don't know how to close. Right. And I think that's a long-standing tradition, that we blame the other guy no matter where we're at. Right. But I think there's a leadership vacuum in that process, that it should be so clear where the handoff is and how that handoff is done, that there's not a blame game. Now, you'll get into nuances of, is the quality of the qualified person that goes into the funnel, are they really fully qualified, or did we dump people into the funnel that didn't need to be there? That's a legitimate argument.
Yes.
But where the handoff takes place and who should be doing what at what stage of the game should be crystal clear.
Yes. So there's so many different routes to go in this topic. The first thing that pops into my head is actually you standing in front of a whiteboard drawing buckets of who's doing what and drawing processes. The process has to be crystal clear, and not just the process, but it has to be backed by data at all times, at every step. And I will say the hardest part is not getting people to agree what the process is. The hardest part is getting them to get the data to actually do it. Because when you have to, let's say you have a standing meeting on Mondays where you just check in to see how things are going. Everyone's like, that's good. I don't mean it in a conniving way, but I can BS my way through things are going good. Something's coming up. I've been talking to so-and-so yesterday. I think we have a really good Q3 coming up. Easy to do that. But we start putting feet to the fire, and we start putting KPIs and numbers behind things. That's when you can tell. That's when you know when things are getting dropped. And so, like, if I hold up a piece of paper, I'm not sure if it's going to show up normal or inverted. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But in a decision tree, if people are, let's say like they go to the website, that's what this thing represents. This is not going to make any sense. I'll show you the graphic afterwards. And then they say yes, and then they go over here. But if they say no, what happens? We have to define what happens and where they go. And so a lot of times people just end it right there. They end it at the no. And so this is part of the handoff process of, okay, well, they said no, but are we going to retarget them? Are they falling into the black hole? And so when you start putting the data behind that, that's when you really start knowing who's dropping off and where. And to your part about like like you said, there's so much nuance in the levels of qualification. And the third party involved in this is product or service deliverable. We're marketing something, but gosh, the product isn't that great. And that's a part of it too. It's like there's really not demand, and marketing is always the first one to get pressure because we're top of funnel, and that makes sense. It's the natural place. but it is a dance. It is always a dance. That what's missed is that they have to be in working together. Like, you can't have separate sales meeting and marketing. I mean, you should, but you should also always have a combined meeting, like once a week. Like, these two heads, and you and I have had this discussion before, is like, if you have a CMO, like when I go into an organization as a fractional CMO, I don't go, okay, cool, let's talk about the website and social media graphics, and that's part of it. I go, how are we implementing this? I'm looking at marketing, I'm looking at sales 50-50. At the end of the day, I am responsible for both of those. And that's the piece. It's like having that core, like, single throat to choke. You've probably heard that phrase bounced around before. Having the single throat to choke of, like, whose feet at the end of the, ultimately, all the KPIs are going to be burning at my feet. And that's where you have to, because that's how you avoid the pointing in my world, is just make it one person's responsibility to get both done, because that person's going to be incentivized to do that very strongly.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I learned to clean up my language and quit using, violent metaphors that I used in the military. So we don't use the throat to choke as much. We say there's one belly button to push. Because what I found, but what I found was leadership in the military and leadership in the civilian world is roughly the same thing. You just got to clean up the language. And it turns out that sarcasm is a primary language in the military that just doesn't carry in the civilian world until people really get to know you. So in marketing, there's I think two major functions, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm sure you will. Is there's the branding and the evergreen sort of thing of like, okay, let's be consistent with our brand identity, and then there's lead generation, and both of those are functions. You need to get things into the funnel, but if you have a finite number of hours in a small company and a very small team doing your marketing, a lot of the people coming out of marketing schools want to spend a lot of time on the branding piece and let's make a beautiful website, and they're not generating leads for the sales team to follow up on.
Yeah, there are those two sides. And so I came in from the soft art side. That was my angle. And so, like, I have a very intense protection of that realm when I work with artists, and they're like, they're working overtime. I'm like, guys, stop! Like, protect yourself. Like, you care, and that's great. But like, so I have that very strongly. That being said, that does exist to serve lead gen at the end of the day, because the DNA of a business is where is money coming from, and how do we reverse engineer it to get there. So it is a tension point. It's the, I think I mentioned Mad Men earlier. If you watch Mad Men, it's like art versus like accounts, and like they're always kind of going back and forth. I have worked with businesses for a quarter who at the end of the quarter go, we actually don't need marketing. And they're right.
Okay.
And I go, and sometimes they hire me to make sure that they didn't. And I'm like, yeah, it's, there's always areas we can clean up, we can improve things, but we're trimming fat on the margins here. And it's when do you need to have the art side to create that inspiration? Because, to define marketing in and of itself, it's getting someone somewhere to do something using what? Words, images, videos, and sounds. If we're not compelling someone to act, if we don't need to compel someone to act, then we shouldn't waste the time on really what a lot of money gets sunk into. Sometimes when I'm doing speaking engagements, I have a slide, and it lists all the things that marketing can do. It's like an exhaustive list, right? Or extensive, but not exhaustive. But it's still it's such a big list. I have to turn it sideways onto the presentation screen. And what happens is CEOs or leaders in an organization will take this list and they have it in their head and they go, okay, we need social media. Let's get a social media person. Check. And so they're like, well, we're doing this, the marketing thing. We're working with this company and they're managing our website. This is my favorite one. They're managing our website and we had less leads last month. I say, okay, well, what are they doing on your website? Well, they do edits and they do, a little bit of organic SEO. Okay. Are they responsible for leads? No. Okay. Why are you asking them what's playing into this? What are you doing differently? So those type of those things get missed because we kind of, I've used this analogy before. It's like my wife says, hey, we need a new car. So I go and I get a 2-seater sports car. Now we have 2 kids and we have 1 on the way, right? Yeah. Me getting a 2-seater sports car is a terrible idea, no matter how bad I might want one. If I come home with that, she's like, why did you get that? And I said, well, you said we needed a new car, right? So you kind of just check that box on paper, but you don't get what you actually need. And that's so common is like, hey, I see effort, I'm spending money on it, and I'm not getting the results. And so the question is, do we need all of these things that are on this massive list? The answer is yes, but not always all the time for everyone, right? There are different applications and different ways for different businesses. Sometimes all you need is a website so people can have a digital brochure to land on. Yep. Sometimes you need a website because 99% of your sales are going to come through it, right? And those are completely separate approaches.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I set up my first website because people were asking me for more information when I would meet them at a networking event. And 100% of my clients for the first year were coming out of networking events. And so they're like, but can I look at your website? Well, I guess I better put one up. Yeah. Now it's evolved because the business has grown and there's actually some business that is generated from the website itself. And there's some complicated people in the background doing SEO stuff. And it's fantastic. I love what it looks like and I love how people are fumbling through it. But it's a different purpose now than when it was established, which is why it's now a different website. And, as a complete amateur learning how to follow a template on GoDaddy to create a website to what it is now, that was sufficient then for what the business was then. I need someone smarter than me on web design to do what it is now because the company is something different. Mm. And as I grew, the requirements to reach out to the public and the potential customers changed.
Right. And
it was, I think, an important moment in the transition of this business. And I say this a lot. I read a book by Dan Sullivan called Who, Not How. Mm-hmm. And one of the premises in there is if you're trying to figure out how to do something, you should be asking, who can do this for me?
Yeah.
And I coach a lot of leaders into, listen, you need to keep somebody between you and your problem, right? You need to delegate, automate, or outsource as much as you can so you can focus on strategic issues. And then when I read that book and I thought about, I'm not coaching myself in that manner. I need a who, not a how. And I'm not going to grow beyond the GoDaddy template kind of business unless I have someone. And now I could go and study that. I could spend 6 months taking courses and reading books and watching videos and figure that out. But what a waste of my time.
Yeah.
Because there's somebody already really good at that.
Right.
Who loves that and doesn't have to figure out how because they already know.
Yeah.
So that was a big moment in the kind of a tipping point for the coaching business was if I want to be the best marketer in the world, then I should just go start a marketing business and just do that and figure that out. But if you want to be a coaching business, have someone else do the marketing piece. Yeah. And I've been super happy with the team that I've got right now. You mentioned something else that I think is incredibly important because in the argument between marketing and sales is that sometimes your product just sucks. And I heard you say this probably 100 times when you were coaching young entrepreneurs and founders at Synapse is let's talk about product market fit. Do you have a market for your product? Because you sat around a kitchen table one time and on the back of a napkin sketched something out, and all your friends went, "That's amazing. You should start a business around that." And they were right. There's a market for that in that kitchen.
I like that.
There were 6 people who were all on board, and they're all going to buy one.
Yeah.
But unless there's a 7th person outside of that room and about 150,000 others behind them, you probably don't have a Fortune 100 business idea in your kitchen. Because your product might be great, but there's no market for it.
Right.
Or your product, there's a great market out there, but your product sucks. So
Yeah. There's a phrase that I use in different circumstances, but really when people kind of go into the PR conversation and they found themselves in a situation where, let's say they're a known entity, a known product, known service, and it's not what it once was. And so there's a question that I use. I say, okay, they're like, we need to do some PR work on this stuff. I say, I agree. Do we have a PR issue or do we have a reality issue? And we're using PR to solve it. Is this a messaging issue or is this a reality issue? Now we can use PR, we can use messaging to solve that problem for a little bit, but like no more than 3 or 4 quarters. It's gonna just the bubble's gonna pop after that. And so, what do you do when you get to that point? Is you have to face the music. You just have to look at the product and go, okay, this isn't working. And that's hard. No one wants to hear a marketer talk. And it's funny that I'm in marketing because I'm clearly a marketer. I'm not in marketing because I was passionate about it, because I was a student of it or any of that kind of stuff. I got into it because I was forced to by life. And so I reverse engineered my way through to being successful in it. But yeah, it really does start with the product market fit. And it's I'm not trying to be like Adam Smith here. But if there's not a true desire for it, I can't create desire.
Right. You can accentuate somebody's desire for something. Right. You can tap into an emotional stream about your product that can lead to a sale or to a decision to buy. Yeah. But you can't create an emotion about something from nothing. Right. And I always say, if what would you, if you have a hot dog and stand and you want to sell hot dogs, what is it the biggest thing you need? Is it the right location? Is it the best hot dog? And of course the classic answer is, you want a hungry crowd.
Yeah.
Right. But if your crowd's not hungry for what you're offering, if your hot dog sucks, yeah, it's not going to matter. They've got to be really hungry. Right. And you've got to be the only hot dog available for miles.
And I think the food industry and restaurants is a great use case for this. Now, obviously the hunger part, but taking it a step further, there's so many restaurants, and everyone knows, it's one of the riskiest businesses to get into, but everyone wants to get into it because it's a life thing. It's like, when I retire, that's my goal too. Like, don't get me wrong, but I'm involved with a lot of restaurants now, and breweries. The number one thing is actually combining the two things you said is, are there hungry people close to you for what you have? I was talking to someone who has a phenomenal British style pub, legitimate chef, amazing food, and he's like, I can't get people in the door. Community is amazing, the locals are great. He said, but we can't branch out from what we have as a core group. And he was like, I need I need marketing help. And I was like, I got nothing. Because unless we can create some crazy scheme to get people to travel here, it's not going to happen. The most successful companies, restaurants that I've worked with, they usually sit close to an apartment complex. That's true. I've really tried to like boil this down, like what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, there are destination restaurants
Right.
that people will travel to get to, but they're offering something very unique. Yep. And it's not, it's probably not your everyday, right. I live next door, so I'm going to go pop in for a burger type of place, right? It's
right.
something very special.
Yeah, it's for the average restaurant that someone would open up. That's a great point, yeah.
Yeah. So product market fit is such an incredible, important thing for business leaders to reevaluate periodically, because the market is fickle, right? They will change. There are some things that they will always need. You're always going to need transportation and communication. You're always going to need food of some kind, whether or not it's a beautiful destination restaurant or a pub or a grocery store. You're going to need those things. But when we're talking about technology things, those get outdated pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And so the reevaluation piece, and you could set up a perfect system that has a balance between marketing and sales so they work together well. You have great product market fit, and it works for a while. And what you'll hear people say, and I've heard this from 1,000 leaders, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And that is a recipe for stagnation. That's a recipe for the market will shift out from under you, and you'll say, but we have a perfect system. How can we be losing market share? Because the market changed.
Yeah.
And we have to anticipate those changes. And even when we get those wrong, we have to have a process for reevaluating where we are. Because marketing, sales, operations, admin, and finance, all those things have to work together and be synchronized in a way that's adaptable to the changing market.
I mean, the classic line that I hate, because it sounds like Grant Cardone or someone obnoxious like that, is follow the money. And I mean that as a data point. Follow the money is following the money is following the market. And so when things, I grew up in the agricultural world, and so like my brain always jumps to a more blue collar lens first before I think about SaaS, even though that's like the world I live. I live in such a tech world now. If people have my dad is a citrus farmer. If all of a sudden someone's not buying a certain type of orange, I'm not going to keep planting that orange, right? It's very like we know this intuitively, but what happens is we dig our identity into our business as it is, and like just like you said, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Maybe, but if it's changing, maybe change with it. And that goes back to the data point. Is if you don't have that data, it's going to take you 2 years to realize that last year was not an anomaly, because you don't have graphs, you don't have anything. You're just kind of going off. Oh, all of a sudden, okay, and now we're offering like almost a completely different service, and we don't have the right people to do that type of service because we hired for this specific thing. And those changes happen gradually, but they also happen very fast. There's the phrase is sometimes a year can happen in 2 days, and sometimes 2 days can happen in a year. And it's one of those, when you have data, you can actually look back after 1 or 2 quarters and go, oh, this is a trend, right? And not have to wait 2 years, 2 decades until you finally decide to make some of those changes and follow the right way. You're writing a lot, Bob.
I'm writing a lot.
Really good.
I'm the wisdom from Wes is what I'm about to. So I've got to sum up because we're at the end of our time here. But Wes, thank you so much. Here's my takeaways. Right, a major goal for every leader, not just a marketing coach or consultant, is to have your client or your team say, "I never thought about that," or "I've never thought about this like that." Major goal. I think that's incredibly powerful because then you're changing minds. Processes, they need to be explicit and backed by data. It doesn't do you any good to have great processes that you actually aren't evaluating the effectiveness of.
Right.
Follow the money. Follow the money, because that's an indicator of where look, people are voting with their cash. That's it. That's the indication of where the market is shifting, not just what they say and not how they answer surveys, but it's where they're spending their hard-earned dollars.
It's a data reflection of human interest.
Bingo. I love that. That's a great statement. And finally, and I think this is incredibly important, understand your values and your identity. And then you got to make sure that your culture and your business reflect those.
And not just on a poster board.
Yes, I spend a lot of time talking to leaders about leading by example. And if you don't embody your values, your company's values, neither will your folks.
Right.
And you don't have the influence over your culture that you want. And that culture is going to eat your lunch if you let it. Wes, I can't thank you enough for sharing your wisdom, not just today, but over the years. It's been a true pleasure talking with you this morning. And I know that particularly those veteran entrepreneurs that are out there that are thinking about how do I grow my business, it has to do with a lot of different things, but not least of which is knowing who you are and then making sure that your branding and your processes reflect your values and your identity.
100%. Thank you, sir, for having me on.
Dude, tell me real quick, what's the easiest way for people to find you?
CMOQ.agency is the website. So there's no .com, right? We're cool. We're hip. We're in the modern era. CMOQ.agency. And on social media, it's at Wes Lehman for all social media. You'll mainly find pictures of my beautiful family.
And an expanding family. The man's losing his office for a third kid. Congratulations on that. I was once told that having 4 kids is not strategic, so I don't know what you guys are planning on doing. But
I'm playing with fire.
I was also told that between the two of you, you have 4 hands, so you should be able to handle this. Wes, thank you again, my friend, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, sir. Talk to you soon.